I will wait a couple minutes for some more people to join on. Sorry, I'm so recovering my voice after being ill for about a week, so bear with me. But as we wait for more people to join, I'll introduce myself. I am Lola Bessis. I'm the liaison manager at Digital for Good. I want to welcome you all to this webinar called the Digital Wellness Guide for Parents and Educators of Gen Z. And today we're joined with Keegan Lee and the organization LookUp, which you'll get to learn more about in a moment. And before we get started, I want to share a little bit more about Digital for Good. So we're a nonprofit that educates students and adults about digital citizenship, safety, wellness, and literacy. Through our programs and events, we aim to celebrate youth innovation, empower student change makers, and promote digital safety. Digital for Good reaches thousands of students nationwide, and our impact is amplified even further by the Train the Trainer learning model featured in our curricula. At the foundation of our work is the idea that students are at the core of the solution to online toxicity. The more we can do to train, guide, and support our students, the more likely they are to take positive action. As a brief reminder, before we get started with the webinar, we have opened the chat feature to the comments and questions from audience members. So we're going to be holding a Q&A session after the presentation. And if you want your question to be featured in the segment, please add 2 pound or hashtag symbols at the beginning of your question, and we'll make sure to get to it at the end of the presentation during the Q&A. And without further ado, allow me to introduce our guest speaker, Keegan Lee. Take it away.
Thank you so much, Lola. I really appreciate that. I am Keegan Lee, and I am a digital wellness activist. And I am just so grateful to be here. I have been working in this space for a very long time, and it really just kind of emerged from personal experience, and I'll give you kind of a short version of the story, but I want this to be very collaborative and conversational. I'm gonna try to make it as interactive as possible, knowing that it's on a Zoom. And I'm just grateful for you all to be here today to just show that you are interested in this topic, you're interested in how we can create a more humane digital world and lift youth voices, because this is a very pertinent topic at this time. So thank you all for being here, and I am very excited. Am I going to do I present my screen, or are we going on this?
You can say next slide if you're ready to move on.
Perfect. Next slide. So this is the agenda that we have. We're gonna kind of go through this pretty quickly because I know that we want to save time for the Q&A in case you all have any questions. But we're gonna go through icebreaker, my story, my personal experience, the actual content of this topic, specifically for parents and educators. So this is the audience that we're looking at. And then we're going to look into specific actionable steps that you can take with you for yourself and for other people. So this is the plan, and we are going to learn and inspire, and it's going to be great. So let's next slide, please. So the first thing is that, can you recognize this digital slang? Okay, so I don't know if you have a raise hand feature or whatever, you could just type it in the chat, but I'm curious to know, I think this is, perhaps we have a very intergenerational audience today, and we have people from all different ages. So I'm curious to know how many of these you might actually been able to recognize. Being in Gen Z myself, I looked at some of these and I don't even know what they are, but I'm curious to know what, if you could type them in the chat, if you have any wild guess of what they might be. It's kind of funny. It's quite comical to see there's so many more. But oh, Lola knows all but two. Wow, that is quite impressive. But if you think about these, it's they can you can kind of infer what they mean, but this just goes to show how Generation Z has sort of created their own digital language within the online environment, just as humans have evolved very naturally to create language. It's become a different world for them to the point where they feel like we need to kind of create this digital slang, these alternatives to shortening our vocabulary and creating more efficient ways of communication. So I just thought that was quite funny, and it's always nice to see who can recognize them, and it creates a good generational conversation. So thank you all. Next slide, please. So I don't know how interactive we can make this, but if you could just think to yourself, or I don't know if there's a raise hand feature, but if you have a phone, if you have social media, kind of how often you check your screen time, just from a self-awareness perspective, if you're happy with your screen time, and if you wish to improve your screen time, and how just kind of getting an idea to yourself of how dependent you might be or how non-dependent you might be, just to kind of show how we interact with technology on a day-to-day basis and what platforms we use, which ones we gravitate toward. It always seems like that different platforms are they're ever changing in terms of their popularity. And so we're always sort of at a high point with some of the platforms, and then some of them are being less used, but then that could change very quickly. So technology and social media platforms, they're ever changing and very, very quickly changing. It looks like we've got some info in the chat. Yeah, so screen time is, and it's screen time encompasses a lot of things, right? Not just social media. And so I think with the world that we live in, it's quite difficult to separate ourselves from that. Okay, moving on. So just a brief history of my story. In the midst of the pandemic, I found myself incredibly gravitating toward social media platforms. I thought that if I were to constantly engage with them, constantly interact, that my social life would be amplified. And so I became immersed in the numbers, immersed in the comments, the likes, the conformity. Everyone was using it. Everyone was talking about it. Everyone was talking about things on social media. And I felt like I, was disconnected from the physical world, and that was during the pandemic. And so I feel like if there's a good thing that came out of the pandemic for me, it was that it gave me the self-awareness that I needed to understand that this was a problem and that I wanted to make a change. So I deleted social media for 60 days, and during that time, I reflected. I journaled every day my thoughts and feelings and emotions, and I collaborated with this man, Dr. Gandor. He's a clinical psychologist and professor of psychology at Elon University, and we wrote a book about this together. And the main thing about the book is that it provides the story and the science, both things very important for the evolution of human knowledge. And we wanted it to be tangible. We wanted this information to be tangible. We wanted youth, parents, educators to use it as a resource that could provide insight from one youth story, and then also providing the data, the psychology behind the why behind our behaviors. So that was how it all emerged, and that was how I got really into this. You can move on to the next one. So the key takeaways really were that I had more creativity, I was more stimulated, I was truly connecting face to face. Because I was, having to make the eye contact, read body language, facial expressions, all of these very primitive elements of human connection that were amplified and really just I was able to see them in a more amplified way because They were being communicated in their most raw form. I developed healthier habits. Eating, I was eating well, but that wasn't just that's not just part of your diet, right? Your diet is not just what you eat. I was mentally just in a really good serene place. I was more active. I was exploring other hobbies. A big thing that I picked up was handwritten letter writing. That was something that I didn't used to do, and I think it's a very beautiful way of showing vulnerability and gratitude for others, and that's something that I still am very much immersed in. Better communication skills, improved attention span, and realizing that there truly is beauty in privacy, not feeling compelled to share every element of your life on social media and to just sit and be in solitude. And so I developed this higher tolerance for boredom, and that is incredibly fulfilling and to just be unstimulated for even a brief second, especially in a world that is very hyper connected in many ways. That was probably one of the greatest things that came out of that experience, the ability to just enjoy my own solitude. And continue, please. So this is where we get into the kind of content, and I want to acknowledge the difficult position of parents in today, because I want to learn as much as I can from you all. If you have children, if you plan to have children, and how I can help you, and I want to understand where your positioning lies. And so the truth is, we have grown up in different generations. If I'm thinking about my parents and most Gen Z's parents, there's different generations happening, different safety precautions that we had to take growing up. Where for my parents' generation, it was more so that you had to be at home before the lamppost light came on outside, and cross the street and with looking both ways and don't talk to strangers. And now the online world is just as important to look out for in terms of safety and dangers, just as the physical world in many ways. And so this is where we kind of get into the digital divide, where we're growing up in a different world, and it's a responsibility to educate ourselves and keep up with this emerging knowledge of technology and how we can communicate in different ways, because there's this gap. Technology has provided a different childhood, and a different way of raising our children. And so then you get into this, but mom, everyone has social media, and you're like, well, I don't want my child to be excluded, but I'm also aware of the potential dangers of social media. And so that's kind of where you are put in this rough spot. And then that if you were to allow your child to use social media, then there are potential risks. They are vulnerable to those. There are so many different topics that we can go into. And so I have a question. From your perspective, why do you feel like it's difficult to raise children in the digital age? Does it come down to privacy? Are you worried about connection and them not being present at the dinner table? Are you worried about them comparing themselves 24/7 online to the pictures, the highlight reels? Are you not worried? Do you feel like that they truly are benefiting from it in a meaningful way? Because that is my viewpoint, really, is that we're needing to find this middle ground. Technology is still emerging, and it's not going away. Social media is not going away. It's about not being naive to see the flip side of that coin and appreciating the beauty of technology while not being afraid to acknowledge that there are challenges. We can continue, please. So these are just some statistics just kind of showing the prevalence of social media usage among youth and why it's so important to use or to be educated on this because of how densely used it is around the world. And so, we're mainly seeing YouTube as most commonly being used among 13 to 17-year-olds and 18 to 24-year-olds. Facebook tends to take more of a back burner, as well as Twitter, known as X now. But Snapchat is also, I've heard, kind of taking more of a down. It's not as prevalent anymore. And then we have Instagram, which has kind of always been quite common as well. And so these are just kind of showing the prevalence, the popularity, why it's being used so much. What is this? How is it going to affect our development? How is it going to affect our communication? How, if at all, we don't have enough data right now, but we're learning every day, and this is one step to knowing, just because of the prevalence and how common it is, what might be contributing to these factors, and why are youth so motivated to use it. There's so many questions. We can continue. And so this is just a graph just showing the increase of mental health, specifically major depressive disorder, in girls and boys. And so what we're seeing here is kind of right around the time social media platforms started to increase, we're seeing an increase in mental health conditions as well. And so what we can't say in this situation is that social media causes mental illness. We can't say that because we don't have enough data on that right now. But we are seeing a relationship between when social media started to increase and when mental illness started to increase as well. So a positive correlation. And whether that means social media is causing it or not, we can't say that, but we could say that it's a possible contributing factor to this, and something that needs further research. Continue, please. And so these are just some more statistics in regards to mental health and in its connection to phone usage. And so this is a reality, and it's not just coming from the statistics. I've seen it in my peers. I've seen it in my sister. I've seen it in adults. Just these behavioral changes from the stories, from the words, from an experience, from a personal subjective experience, and stories, that this is real. And yes, these statistics are scary as well. But it's also showing that this is a combination of a very holistic data viewpoint that we're hearing from multiple different sources, that there are very many challenges associated with social media and its potential to harm mental health. And I thought the last point was very interesting in regards to phantom vibrations. I don't know if you all know what that is, but it's basically the idea that we are hearing the buzz of our phones, and it's not even there. And so that's just kind of showing this digital dependence, that we're kind of hallucinating in a way, hearing the buzz in the background, and it's not even there. And so that has also been quite common. I don't know if you all have ever experienced that, but it's kind of like, wow, maybe I am a little, I've been using my phone quite a bit, and I'm actually starting to hear it when it's not even there. So I thought that was an interesting point. Continue. So this is just some information on, again, the generational aspect. Parenting is difficult because this is what a lot of parents are saying. Parenting is harder today than it was 20 years ago, mainly because of this technology and social media at the top of being so prevalent and being so difficult to navigate in terms of wanting your children to be part of what's going on in the world and with their peers, and also understanding that there are certain challenges to that. So I wanted to kind of show this to give a sense of familiarity if other people are experiencing the same thing in regards to parenting. And then of course you have your other elements as well that you all might relate to. But this is very much a common theme that we see among parents, is that technology and social media are cause some hurdles and arguments, and it is a reality. Next slide, please. And so these are some digital literacy terms that might be helpful as we continue to move through this material. And first of all, notifications. There are so many different types of notifications these days. So-and-so mentioned you in their story, their post, and now they're coming up with all these different notifications that aren't even necessary. Like, this person viewed your story, or this person posted in a long time. And it's for the purpose of increasing your engagement within the platforms and trying to get you to go on your phone. And so we have the like effect, which is trying to increase your engagement through the gratification of likes. The social media algorithm business model works by saying, if we can use so many of these little psychological tactics to get them to increase their attention on these platforms, then we're going to profit off of that. And so if you are not making any money, then you essentially, if you're not buying anything, then you are the product. And so they are making money off of your engagement and continuous attention. And every little action that you take is being closely monitored and recorded to create a more accurate identity of who you are. And so these are just some of the vocabulary that might be helpful to understand, just digital footprint, how you kind of leave your mark online wherever you go. And specific dopamine. Dopamine is that pleasure hormone that you get whenever you're on social media, and it feels good, and it can be overused. Fractured attention and mindless scrolling. So these are just some of the elements that are associated with the online environment, and why we keep coming back to social media, and why it's how the algorithm might not be the most conducive for our privacy and our own control of how we use it. And continue. So this is the dopamine reward loop. And so this is what is happening when you pick up your phone. You get a dopamine hit, right? And then your brain remembers that and was like, oh, that feels nice. Just like when we eat sugar, when we listen to music, when we exercise, all these things. And so what happens is you have a dopamine threshold where your body naturally wants to maintain a certain natural state of dopamine. The more you use social media and get that dopamine, it pushes the threshold higher. So it takes more time and more effort to get that level of pleasure that you originally did. And so that's why they recommend sometimes the dopamine detox, such as, removing yourself from that form of dopamine and replacing it with other natural forms, such as sunlight, authentic conversation, things of that nature. So dopamine is relatively complex and misunderstood in many ways. And I won't go too much deep into it, but that's sort of the baseline for what I think is important here. And so the main thing is that you can experience things and not overly consume them. And so in moderation, and having that conscious awareness as you're going through and asking yourself, is this still benefiting me? And what is scary in regards to youth is that this dopamine you get from social media and the dopamine you get from a raw and real human connection and conversation, it's difficult for you sometimes to differentiate the different amounts of pleasure that you can get from both of those interactions. And so if they're spending too much time online and they're experiencing this dopamine hit, then they may not prioritize the pleasure that they get from interacting with a human being as much. And so that's why it's really important to prioritize real human connections and getting that interaction from a very young age to ensure that that is the primary way that they are getting their conversational skills and social skills. Can continue. So this is a picture of a brain online, and it's a teenager, and this teenager is looking at a picture on social media with a high amount of likes. And so what's happening here is that this part of the brain that's highlighted in green is a part of the brain called the nucleus accumbens, and it's part of the brain's reward circuitry. What's fascinating about this is that this is not how our brains have evolved. Our brains haven't always evolved by being stimulated by a like or a comment, because we haven't always had this. So what's happened is our brains, or this particular teenager's brain, had become primed to associating a high amount of likes with reward over a habitual time period. And so the brain remembers things that make us feel good. And so it's sort of like it documented this feeling. And now every time the individual, gets a like or something on social media, this part of the brain is activated. This study also found from the National Library of Medicine that when individuals online saw a picture on social media with a high amount of likes, they were more likely to like that picture, even if it was immoral or unethical. And so it showed these pictures of things happening that were not, bullying or something in the picture, and people online were more likely to like that post if it had a high amount of likes. So that just shows that we associate a high amount of likes with something good, and we're conforming to that, even if it's not something that we agree with. We can continue as well. And so when we talk about this concept of evolutionary psychology and what the different ways that social media perpetuates these addictive behaviors, where does this come from, and how does social media fulfill our instinctual needs in many ways? And so this is a topic that I became quite interested in sort of understanding the origins of why is the biological makeup of the human brain so captivated by what is going on with social media. And so I'm going to explain this in the next slide. So this, maybe some of you have seen this. This is Maslow's hierarchy of needs. And so this is something that I became interested in, where I assessed the social media algorithm through the lens of Maslow's hierarchy of needs. And so the basic, if you haven't seen this, how this works is that it goes from, it's a hierarchy. So at the bottom, Maslow predicted that if an individual were to attain all of these things in a decent amount, in a plentiful amount, then they would reach this element of self-actualization, that one can become what they desire to be. And so physiological, and they're in the order of most important to kind of least important, with most important being at the bottom, with physiological needs, and then safety needs, and then love and belonging and esteem. So that's sort of how that works. And if you go to the next slide, this is how I assessed the social media algorithm through the lens of Maslow's hierarchy of needs. So you look at the physiological needs in terms of how social media kind of sends us on this high alert. So it activates our fight or flight response. A literal physiological response happens. And there's so much information on this topic, but it does release our cortisol levels. It does affect our sleep. It does affect so much of our arousal. And that has the ability to create a physical response, sometimes without ever even triggering our awareness. So then you have safety needs. It's a desire to feel kind of part of a herd. And from an evolutionary perspective, this is very true, feeling part of a group and being on social media, getting this attention from these people from everywhere. It feels really nice. Belonging and love, which you are attaining through the likes and the comments and people saying, "Oh, you're amazing, you know, you look so good," and all of this in the comments section. And so it's uplifting. It can be meaningful. I'm not saying that it's negative at all. This is why we are so attracted to this. And it's very real. And then esteem, kind of getting the numbers and getting the expected numbers of likes and comments that you wished in your mind. And so that's kind of different than belonging and love, where you're receiving these notifications. Esteem is when you reach this expected value of likes on a post. And if you don't get that, if you don't get that expectation, it's kind of like a little subtle jab. And it can leave you thinking about how you use social media. You can move on, please. And so what can we do in terms of actionable steps? Well, the 5 C's were developed by the American Academy of Pediatrics Association by their pediatricians. And they are different for children and adolescents in terms of the material involved with them. But you have the child, so you assess the child in terms of how they're using their social media, why they might be attracted to it, what they might be using it for. Content, what are they looking at? What are they soaking up? Is it more, materialistic content? Is it more, are they more using it for social purposes? Is it serving them? Is it healthy for them? So really doing a deep dive into what they're absorbing. Calm is how it might be affecting their stress. Are they in a level of distress? And how might you be able to find the middle ground between, if you do choose to give your child social media, how do you find that middle ground between balance? Crowding out is noticing kind of how often or not often they might be participating in important family activities, important elements of interaction and communication. How is it affecting how they communicate? Is it more aggressive? Are they looking at social media in a way as a tool, or is it more so for convenience or for stimulation? And so we can kind of look at these 5 C's to evaluate and question how students and children are using the online world for their safety, for their health, for their well-being, and social future. And so this is another element of parenting that I wanted to touch on, which is the importance of solitude. And so I developed this sort of flow chart here when I found solitude to be such an incredible element of just development and self-perspective and self-perception. And so if the idea is that, in just kind of summary of this chart, is that if you can give your child, if you can give your student yourself the ability to be with themselves, unstimulated, and just kind of develop this tolerance for boredom, then they will learn to accept themselves, and they won't have the desire to feel connected to other people all the time. And if we don't do that, if we don't teach our children how to be with themselves, then they will only ever know how to be lonely. And so the idea is that just because you're alone in a moment doesn't mean that you're lonely. It means you're finding strength within yourself, so that when you do come into the position of interacting with others, you can be fully there for them, and you can then give yourself that space of self-reflection. And so these are just some more points on solitude, which I just touched on. So we can, and there's this one graph here that I did with a little experiment at my school. Nothing peer reviewed in any sort of way, but I just found it very interesting that so many, and we see this as a theme across the youth, from what I have seen from my experience, is that most teenagers use social media when they feel bored. And so when they feel this stimulation. And so if that's one of the causes as to why youth use social media, kind of developing this, less desire to always be on it and just sitting with themselves and pondering the most mundane things, um, can perhaps reduce the need to go on social media in times of boredom. And thank you, Kate, yes, for that. Solitude is so important, and I wish it was talked about more as a key feature of development. Continue, please. So these are just some digital vocabulary that might be helpful in case you are a parent and you are hearing your kids talk about this and you have no idea what they mean. Ghosting, sharenting, Snapchat dysmorphia. So ghosting is sort of, when somebody's talking to somebody and then they just kind of leave them out in the dust, don't really communicate or follow up. And this is actually becoming, it's quite scary how common it is to just not feel the need to interact, or because it's so easy to hide behind the screen, right? And not feel the need to clarify something with someone or do that. You feel like you can just disappear. And so that's one of the elements that is unique within the digital world that we live in. Sharenting is the idea that children sometimes feel like their parents are sharing too much information about them online. Snapchat dysmorphia is a concept that has been used in plastic surgery when young people come to plastic surgeons and request that they want to look like Snapchat filters. And it's quite sad, very sad. Phubbing has become very common. It's where you are making eye contact while simultaneously texting. So you're kind of you're killing two birds with one stone, making it look like you're, paying attention, but then also texting at the same time. Nomophobia is very real. It's the legitimate fear of losing your phone. And you might have witnessed that when people don't have their phone with them, or they feel like they've lost their phone, you can see a physical reaction happening to them. It is like they've lost something very, very close to their heart, which in many ways it's a scary situation to be in because of how much information is held in those things. Phantom vibrations, we talked about that. Streaks are most commonly used on Snapchat, which we won't go too much into that. It's just a feature that when you snap a picture of yourself with someone else every day, then it creates a streak. And it is amazing how many people, including myself in the past, were so keen on keeping that streak. Catfishing is where you pretend to be someone that you're not online, being left on red or open. These are the terms that I've heard the youth use, and it's a debilitating experience in many youth's words. And as you grow older, as I've seen, it's not as serious as you think, and you gain some wisdom on these minor things that seemed so big when you were in middle school. Double texting is a term where it's like when you send two texts or more than one text and you don't want to seem desperate or something. Cancel culture is when someone does something bad and they just it's like, oh, they're canceled online or something like that. So these are just some vocabulary words that are very interesting, and I'd be interested to hear any of your thoughts on these, if you've ever heard of them, or if you have any others that you have no idea about, or that you've heard people use. And you're like, oh, that's interesting, how these interesting concepts are continuing to evolve and continue. So for educators, just to kind of brief, because I know we're kind of close to getting at time, but there are certain applications that technology has in the classroom, both beautifully and potentially used as a distraction. So we're trying to move into this new area of educational technology, which is how we can rethink traditional pedagogical methods and include technology as a method of learning and how we can do it in a balanced way while still maintaining past ways of teaching that have been proven to be very successful. And so in terms of how we might want to use technology in the classroom, some of you, I don't know if any of you recognize this logo here, Duolingo is very, very successful in terms of using technology as a force for good and using it to make people extremely thrilled to learn. And these are some of the elements that they use that students love and that I've seen professors use in the classroom in college. And, you know, they have streaks, they have this idea of consistency and being committed to what you're doing, gamification, any type of, you know, gamified thing that makes it feel like you're winning something. The lessons are bite-sized, good for attention span, they're interactive, you get immediate feedback, different skill levels, then you get reminders saying you need to come back. And so these are just some of the things that you might, if you're an educator, want to consider in using in your classroom. Continue. And so this is the 5J approach to technology. I won't go over this, but just kind of in general, making sure that as an educator, you try it out and give it time and seek help from professional development to know how to accurately and efficiently use technology in the classroom, making sure you have the resources to do that. And so again, in terms of action, these are some things that you can do to enhance your relationship with technology. So you can go, you know, cold turkey, do a complete deep cleanse for a very long time without social media. You can do a short cleanse, dopamine fasting. We talked about that. Time limits. It can be easy to extend time limits, but some people have shown them to be effective. Just having the conscious awareness when you're scrolling, which can be difficult, but it is a good self-help mechanism. Out of sight, out of mind, just, you know, kind of having it out of your visual span. The eye level marketing technique is kind of, you know, when you do the opposite of making things convenient to you. So putting your apps in a hidden folder on your lock screen or just completely removing them from your phone so that when you want to access platforms, you go to your laptop and have to log in and all of that. So I'd be interested to hear from you all, you know, what has worked for you, what hasn't worked, and what might work for your children that doesn't work for you, or how, you know, is there a generational difference in terms of how you find these solutions? And so this is a course that I created where this is kind of a brief overview of some of the topics within the course where I touched on several of these in the presentation today. And so if you go to my website, which you will find that discount code, which is I Can Help, and you will get $55 off for this course. And so it is kind of covers a little bit of everything in regards to science, in regards to emotional intelligence, education, things like that. So if you are interested, you can get a discount. And so to end, the big picture is that social media is not going away. Technology is going to continue to advance in incredible ways. And you all, as parents, as educators, have a tremendous voice in moving this digital wellness movement forward, and maintaining this pure element of human connection and togetherness and humanity that we hold so sacred and should hold so sacred. And so I have faith, and I have hope that the youth and that parents and educators and schools and politicians and people are gonna do their part, because I wouldn't wake up and do this every day if I didn't have some sort of hope that something good come out of this in some way. It's going to take a long time, but we are moving in a good direction, and I have to think optimistically about that. So yes, if you all have any questions, I'd love to answer them, and I apologize if we went over time a little bit, but thank you all so much for listening and for participating in the chat, and just being here. It just shows your interest and commitment to this message. So thank you all very much.
Thank you for your incredible presentation, Keegan. Really, it was inspirational, and our whole mission at I Can Help is that, you know, digital safety and all that is driven by young people, and I think you're an incredible example. And thank you so much for this presentation. Once again, everybody, drop any questions you may have during this Q&A in the chat, and I'm sure, Keegan, your information is out there if people have follow-up questions, or if people are watching this on our YouTube, that they can contact you with. Something that you mentioned I found really interesting was this idea of loneliness. And we hear often, you know, when like our parents say, oh, when I was little and I was bored, I had to sit with my boredom. And that's not really something that the youth is doing now. There's no such thing as just like sitting with your boredom. Right. And you're, because of these like constant online stimulations. So definitely that was something very interesting. So we have a question in the chat that says, what do you find that your younger audiences seem to really love when you spend time talking with them?
I think what the younger audiences really love is that they love talking about. They know what the youth understand is that they know that there are challenges. They know that they don't always feel good after using social media. They know that it is a struggle, but they do love talking about the positive things that can come out of it. They love talking about how they feel like they can contribute to the culture and the trends and express themselves and creativity and document their life through the online world. And they love that. They're very aware of the issue, and many of them are wanting to at least initiate the action of digital wellness. It's about maintaining that I think several of them need guidance on. But you talk to them, and they love this topic. I think it's something that we all can contribute a little bit to in some way. And I think that they really enjoy just sharing their perspectives on what's happening online, and different common themes that are shown. And they will be open. From what I've seen, I've always worried about whether or not the youth would be receptive to this message, because they hear it all the time. But every time I've spoken to them, they've always been incredibly keen to pay attention, to listen, to ask questions, and stay interested. And they're the most difficult group that I talk to, because I am one of them, and I understand. And I myself, I get nervous talking to them more so. They intimidate me more so than people more older generations. So yes, but they do love talking about this. Thank you, Kate.
Well, that's about all the time we have. So thank you again so much, Keegan, for joining us. And as a thank you gift for everyone for attending today, we are giving out free access to our digital safety course for educators and parents. You can access the course for free by using the coupon code DIG Safety 24 before August 31st. And as we close, I encourage everyone to scan the QR code on the screen that will appear to get updates on even more great events and free resources from Digital for Good. Thank you again, Keegan, for all of your wonderful work and for this wonderful presentation. Thanks again to our audience members for tuning in. And I hope you all have a wonderful rest of your day.
Thank you so much, everyone. Thank you.